With the establishment of the United States, immigrants from all over the world emigrated to the New World in search of opportunity. Economic and political unrest in Europe drove this immigration. 44% of the immigrants were Irish, fleeing from the potato famine that plagued Ireland and killed over 1.5 million people. Since the first census in 1790, German, Irish, and English immigrants composed most of the U.S. population. 21% of the immigrants were Germans, fleeing from violent rioting. 14% were composed of English immigrants, as there was a constant flow of immigration from England since early in American history. People would frequently move to cities in search of industrial jobs, especially in New York City, as it was full of opportunity.
That's the building of our country right there, Mr. Cutting. Americans are borning.
I don't see no Americans. I see trespassers.
The conditions on immigration ships were horrific, as there was overcrowding on many of the ships. When they would arrive in New York, immigrants would frequently be met by people who were affiliated with political machines. These political machines worked through obtaining resources through illegal methods and then giving immigrants either a home, job, or other resources if they would give them their vote.
What have they done? Name one thing they've contributed. Votes. Votes, you say?
In New York City, the primary political machine was run by Boss Tweed. Tweed was a New York-born politician who was elected alderman in 1851 and elected into Congress in 1852. The machine was run out of Tammany Hall because it hosted New York City's Democratic Party. Tweed had a ring of cronies that would greet immigrants and do any other dirty work Tweed didn't want to do himself.
Deliver these good and fervent folk to the polls on a regular basis, and there'll be a handsome price for each vote goes Tammany's way.
These machines had full control over the local government, so they could commit illegal acts such as fake leases, pad bills, get government funding for unnecessary repairs, and overprice certain goods without getting in trouble by the federal government. They had overwhelming power and money, so they were also able to do good in their communities.
When immigrants entered the United States, they would look to people of their same ethnicity for guidance. The large influx of immigrants led to an increased sense of nativism among the American people.
Is this it, priest? The Pope's new army? A few crusty bitches and a handful of ragtags?
This anti-immigrant sentiment was very prevalent when it came to Irish immigrants. The Irish faced especially strong nativism upon arriving in America. With the temperance movement beginning to gain some ground during this time, the Irish newcomers were often referred to as useless drunkards. Irish need not apply became a common sight to see outside businesses. Many immigrants faced similar scrutiny when they arrived in America. This is why immigrants were often forced to work the most undesirable jobs available.
Irish hops. Do a job for a nickel what a nigger does for a dime, and a white man used to get a quarter for.
This nativism also led to many neighborhoods banning immigrants from moving in, which led to the formation of ghettos.
The more division there was, the more tension there would be. So with a lot of immigrants living in very close quarters to different ethnic groups, gangs and gang violence emerged. Gangs were used for protection and created a sense of family and belonging. This sense of belonging was vital because of the discrimination they faced by native-born Americans and other gangs. The first major gang in New York was the 40 Thieves.
The 40 Thieves!
An Irish gang. This gang started in the back of Rosanna Pierce grocery store, who became infamous for housing Irish gangs.
Edward Coleman founded and led the 40 Thieves by establishing a quota system in which people had to steal a certain amount of goods, and if they didn't reach the quota, they would either be killed or had to flee to another gang. They became so big that they even had a sub-gang of children, known as the 40 Little Thieves, who would pickpocket people and grow up being a 40 Thieves member. This gang terrorized the area of Manhattan known as Hell's Kitchen for 25 years. Another area that became a center for gang activity was the Five Points, which is located in modern downtown Manhattan, and there would frequently be gang wars over who had control over this territory.
Immigration continued to increase at the turn of the 20th century. However, during this period, there were more Eastern European immigrants, including Jewish, Polish, and Italian immigrants. These immigrants were much poorer and less educated than earlier, but America promised them refuge, although that is not what happened.
Overpopulation in New York City caused the living conditions to progressively get worse. Tenement housing was created as a temporary solution, but eventually became a permanent solution because the government did not have the resources to provide better housing to poor immigrants. These tenement houses did not provide immigrants with a safe sanitary home, so gangs once again formed in order to create a sense of community and safety.
During the turn of the century, the two major gangs of New York were the Five Points Gang and the Eastman Gang. The 5 Points Gang was an Italian gang in New York that was formed from the people from other gangs that either did not reach their quotas or did something else to get kicked out. They raised many prominent criminals such as Al Capone, who was a gunman for them. After being in the 5 Points Gang, Al Capone became the king of organized crime in Chicago. The 5 Points Gang was a murder-for-hire gang and was the last major street gang before the Prohibition. There were about 1,500 people in the gang that terrorized the streets of New York for years. Their rival was the Eastman Gang, a Jewish gang that started with Edward Eastman. Eastman had connections with the people in the Tammany Hall political machine, which helped them get away with their illegal activities. They were known for their brothels that could be found on Allen Street, gambling, and selling opium. The 5 Points Gang and the Eastman Gang frequently would use violence to establish their territory and show off their strength.
Both of these gangs and many others found in New York would hugely benefit off the 18th Amendment prohibition. Bootlegging alcohol became very common among gangs. Many of the gangs were Italian, and soon after the Prohibition, the Italian Mafia was formed. Lucky Luciano murdered the other major Italian gang leader in New York City, making him the ultimate leader of Italian gangs. He wanted to create a nation of organized crime based in New York City and connected cities like Chicago with New York, which was the capital of organized crime in America.
With the Prohibition came gang violence. Alcohol was incredibly valuable, and gangs would try to steal others' profits off of it. The Mafia would try to intimidate other gangs and steal the money they made off of bootlegging alcohol. Being in the Mafia was a lifetime commitment, and the loyalty that went along with being in it was strict and non-negotiable.
I do you a favor and take Freddie in when you're having a bad time, and then you try to push me out.
Organized crime connected criminals around the country, and during the time of the Prohibition, the Mafia made a lot of money off of the illegal selling of alcohol. They would open speakeasies, which were illegal liquor stores or bars. Speakeasies were highly popular locations in New York City.
They had popular music and would provide alcohol to people in this time of Prohibition. The speakeasies were often visited by all kinds of people, not just members of the Mafia, because everyone wanted to get their hands on alcohol somehow, and the speakeasies were a good way to do that.
The Mafia continued to prosper through the 1970s. John Gotti, the son of Italian immigrants in the South Bronx, was the head of the Gambino family in New York.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
He led the Gambino family through a life of crime. Although Gotti would be placed in prison for his crimes, he was often able to use his power in the Mafia to get himself out. The Mafia has remained successful throughout time, even to today, despite actions taken by the government. In the 1970s, the war against the Mafia commenced and was fairly successful, such as the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The Mafia died down after this, and then in the 2000s, it reappeared. Because police are more focused on terrorism than organized crime, there has not been a push to take down the Mafia once and for all.
Gangs are still very prominent today and are still very violent.
Breaking news this morning, there's been a major gang roundup by the NYPD.
Ferrara, they're confirming that the Mafia are still very much alive and well in New York.
I'm at the scene of one of the biggest NYPD gang takedowns ever.
Now federal authorities bust a drug gang setting up shop in New Jersey. 21 gang members were taken into custody today.
Selling drugs like heroin across the state out of this housing complex in Newark.
The two major gangs in the United States as a whole are the Bloods and the Crips. Many gangs start in prisons such as the Bloods, which was founded by Leonard Deadeye McKenzie and O.G. Mack. Their rivals, the Crips, was formed in Compton by high school students who quickly became organized and spread all over the city of Los Angeles. These two gangs have many different branches in cities all over America, including New York, where at least one of them has a sector in each borough. Gangs in the United States have strong connections to other parts of the world. Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, is one of the world's largest gangs and has an incredibly strong presence all over the United States. However, many of their members are from Latin American countries including El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. They participate in all types of crimes such as murder, rape, prostitution, and kidnapping.
People beaten with baseball bats, tire irons, women raped, pretty regular, couple, 3 a month sort of thing, not a big deal to them.
In 2015, gang violence accounted for 50% of the shootings in New York City. These gangs still provide safety and resources for their members and have a strong sense of loyalty. So next time you're walking through the streets of New York, pay attention to where you are. You might be passing through the territory of any of these gangs.
Are you power and the money, money and the power, minute after minute, hour after hour.